Hello and welcome to the TID Water and Power Podcast. I'm your host, Constance Anderson, and on this month's episode, we're discussing the Lineworkers Rodeo. Every year, hundreds of line workers and apprentices from around the country come together to compete in the American Public Power Association's Lineworkers Rodeo. But there's no roping, bull riding, or barrel racing at this rodeo. Instead, the competitors are climbing poles, replacing equipment, and even doing mock rescues. All for some friendly competition and a whole lot of bragging rights. On this episode, I'm joined by TID Journeyman Lineman Josh Klikna and Apprentice Lineman Will Malone to discuss the Lineworker Rodeo competition, how the rodeo relates to the work they do every day, and their experience at the recent APPA Rodeo. Josh, Will, thanks for joining us.
Hello. Thank you.
All right, so let's start with a little bit of background from each of you. Josh, you want to go first? Tell us how'd you get here?
How did I end up at TID? I grew up in the area. I graduated from high school in Merced, played high school sports, rode bikes, things like that. And then my passion for cycling took over. As I was graduating high school, the winter '99, found myself down at the Olympic Training Center down in Chula Vista. Spent some time down there through the USA cycling program. So that parlayed into signing a professional cycling contract. And from there, that was absolutely my passion. I chased it, and that's what I wanted to do. And I was all in. And by the time I was 24, 25, I realized that the cycling thing wasn't going to pan out. I needed to be in Europe on a Division III team, Division II team, and I saw that was coming to a close. I was on a team with teammates that were, in their later 30s, 40s, and driving a clapped out 4Runner in the Bay Area. And I'm like, man, I think I see more for myself than this. And so I had to close that chapter kind of through the process of riding bikes. I met some people, and somebody had mentioned, hey, have you ever thought about line work? Well, hold on, what's that? Mm-hmm. Got real curious about it and started to look into it and pursue it. I was like, holy cow, this is, and I didn't really know what a trade was at that time. I mean, I didn't, you're young, and it's like, well, it's trade. And what is it, this is a job that you stick with for forever. I mean, it's generally tradespeople. That's what you do.
They learn their craft and stay with it. Yeah.
They learn their craft and they stay with it. And the work looked exciting. It lent itself to some attributes that I had, just out, being outside and outdoorsy, and the work was really attractive to me, and I pursued it with passion. I just threw myself into it. Took me 2 times to get hired on. Got hired on in 2006 as an apprentice lineman, and then went through the apprentice program here at TID for 3.5 years, and then you naturally progress into the journey level position through your apprenticeship, and then here we are. And I love it. It's exciting. It's something new every day. The jobs are challenging. You got to use it's physical. You got to use your body. You got to use your mind. You got to think through situations. So yeah, I love this job. I couldn't imagine doing anything else.
Okay, so professional cycling to lineman, not maybe the typical path that one comes into this career. Will, how about you? Tell us a little bit about your background.
Before this, I worked for the city of Modesto, doing construction for potable drinking water. Line work was kind of something I always, saw myself doing and wanted to do. I'd tried a few times previously before actually getting this job. Came up a little short. Kind of decided I needed to take it a little bit more serious if it was something I wanted to do. My wife pushed me towards going to line school. So, yeah, we saved up for a little while and ended up putting myself through line school. And my daughter was born and kind of pushed me even more to do something more with my life. So, and then yeah, I applied again. This was actually the second time I applied for this job, first before line school and then after line school. And that's when I ended up getting on a little over a year ago.
Would you say that your experience in line school then was kind of that difference maker in you getting the job?
I think it helped, yeah. For me personally, I don't, it might not be for for everyone, but for me, yeah, I think it did help.
Right on. Okay. Well, we're glad to have you both here.
Thank you.
All right. So today we're going to talk about the Lineworker Rodeo. And later on, I want to get into more of the specifics about the rodeo itself, the events, the history, etc. But first, I want to talk about the rodeo that just happened. So you both just participated in the American Public Power Association's Lineworker Rodeo that was held in Roseville. How many teams or people did TID send to the rodeo, and how did it go?
TID supported 2 journeyman teams and 2 apprentices.
Okay. And the results?
I think we squeaked out of 5th place. I think we got seeing some of the times and how some of the other teams were performing. I think we were lucky to get 5th. There was some teams that were on a good day, and you could see it. And those guys were operating at a high level, and their confidence was high, and their routines were good, and it showed. And you could tell, you could see those guys like, oh gosh, these guys are here to win.
They came to play. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think, Josh, you're being a little bit modest. You guys did bring home your 3-man team specifically, brought home a 5th place.
Yeah. Out
of how many teams?
I believe there was 51 utilities represented, and was it 61 teams, somewhere about there?
Yeah, right on. That's awesome. Congratulations.
Yeah, so Dustin, Stevie, and myself, we kind of stuck to our normal game plan, which is just get through the rodeo clean.
Okay.
Perform, get through the routines, how we've practiced them, try not to change too much, and just stick to the plan. And that's all. It's generally served us pretty well going to the rodeo.
And I would say you stuck to the plan pretty well, because you were one of only a handful of teams that finished cleanly. Yeah,
I believe 8 teams finished clean on the day without any deductions.
Right on. And so for our listeners, it's a timed event, but then you can also receive deductions if you make a mistake, if you're not clean, if you drop something, or something's out of place. So to finish clean is pretty remarkable in and of itself.
Yeah, essentially there's 5 events, and each event is kind of a condensed down version of a job we would do on a daily basis. And you're judged on work accuracy, efficiency, safety, all within a set of rules or guidelines based on that specific job.
Right on. Okay. And Josh, you said there were 2 journeyman teams of 3 people each. So who were the other journeyman line workers that competed with you?
The other journeyman team was Josh Griffith, John Damas, and Elliot Fidalgo. And I would say for their first rodeo, this would be John's 2nd rodeo. And so John had a pretty good idea what to expect, but the other 2 did not. And I would say that team performed quite well. I was pretty impressed with their times. It is incredibly difficult to perform at those rodeos and come away clean. And there's a lot going on.
Sure.
There's event changes or adjustments that happen to the routines or a rule change, and you have to adapt. And, it's a lot thrown at you in a day. And those guys made pretty good adjustments. And even their arm change out time was 4th fastest time on the day.
Wow.
Unfortunately they had a deduction, but they were right in there. They were putting out some good routines and performing quite well. But
awesome. Very cool. And then you mentioned the 2 other guys on your team were?
Dustin Krieger and Steve Johnson.
Right on. Okay. And then Will, you were one of 2 apprentices that represented TID. And who was there with you?
Yorick Mendez Martinez. Him and I were the 2 apprentices.
Okay. Right on. So in my time at the district, I've seen TID teams bring home quite a few trophies. How often do you guys get to participate in the rodeo?
I started doing rodeos in 2007 as an apprentice. And then in 2010, Dustin and I teamed up as a journeyman team. And I believe Dustin and I have done a minimum of 1 rodeo a year since 2010. Sometimes we've done just 1, sometimes we've done 3. It just depends. Since 2010, Dustin and I have received support from, IBEW 1245, which is our union.
Okay.
And they've sent us to the International Lineworkers Rodeo, which is kind of like the World Championships.
Got it.
And
okay.
thousands and thousands of people show up to that one.
Oh, wow.
So we've been competing in that one since 2010.
Okay. So there's multiple rodeos in a year that you could potentially participate in.
Yeah, there's rodeos all over the place. There's regional rodeos. There's rodeos, and LAWP puts on a rodeo every year. PG&E puts on a rodeo every year. There's the international, which is kind of the world championships in Kansas City every year. There's a rodeo in the Pacific Northwest that we've done a handful of times. I mean, there's a rodeo in every state. I would say currently that the Southeast is kind of the hotbed right now. That's where like the rodeos are really, really going strong, and they're taking it serious. And you can see that in the results, because a lot of Florida teams, a lot of South Carolina teams.
Okay.
They're doing quite well at these rodeos.
Okay. So of the rodeos that you have participated in specifically, any standouts?
Yeah, I'm certainly proud of our accomplishments at the APPA over the years. When Dustin and I first got together as a journeyman team, we had a couple banner years early on where we would win 3 out of the 4 events or 4 out of the 5 events, win the overall, and we did that back to back.
Wow.
From that point, it was like, where do we go from here? And there's the international. So we approached IBEW. Would you guys be willing to send us to the international rodeo? And they said, sure, we can do that. And the IBEW hadn't really supported anybody on a competitive level yet, so they jumped on board and sent us back there. And the very first year we won an event, and this is, there's anywhere from 250 to 300 teams in a year that compete. But the first year we won an event, a hot stick event, and I believe we got 3rd in the municipality, which is basically the people we competed against this weekend, or this last weekend. And then from there, we just kept participating. And I think over the course to current, we've won the municipality, I believe 6 times. We've placed in it 3 times. And then in 22, we kind of had one of those banner years at the international where we placed in 3 out of the 4 events and then end up winning the overall.
No kidding. Wow. That's awesome. Okay. So this isn't your first rodeo, so to speak.
I've done a few.
Right on. And with great success. So that's really cool. So as we get into a bit of the history of kind of these rodeos and APPA specifically, let's talk about APPA. So on episode 30 of the podcast back in October of 2023, we actually had the new APPA president and CEO, Scott Corwin, on the show. So if any of our listeners want a more in-depth conversation about what APPA is and what they represent, you can give that a listen. But can one of you guys kind of tell us a little bit about what APPA is and what they represent?
So from my understanding, the APPA is the American Public Power Association, and I believe they represent a little over 2,000 public utilities. And APPA is an organization that protects public power interest, allows us to have competitive rates as opposed to our competitors, like a privately held utility. But they tend to protect public utility interest from a legislative standpoint to make sure that public powers can exist and can operate. Our APPA also offers quite a few seminars, trainings in our field, trainings in engineering, trainings in, all sorts of facets of the utility industry. It runs the gamut.
Yeah, even us as communications benefit from some of the trainings that APPA puts together. Yeah. Sure, right on. Okay, so Josh, what is it about the rodeo that keeps you wanting to participate every year?
I certainly like competition. I'm a competitive person. And it's just my curiosity. I wanted to know about it and what it was like, but it's fun to be good at something or attempt to be good at something.
Sure.
And so, yeah, my competitive nature came out, and I wanted to go like, this is my new career. This is my new path. And like, how quick can I be? How efficient can I be? How do I stack up against people from other utilities? That's always something, how does TID and what we do here and our thought process and procedures, like how does it stack up?
All right. So for you, Will, you're kind of early in your career as a line worker, and this was your first rodeo, correct?
Yep.
All right. So what made you want to compete?
Like Josh said, I'm also a competitive person. So anytime I can get any, good kind of competition, especially when it has to do with your career, I'm all for it. I kind of got asked by a couple of journeymen, a few months before we had to try out for the team, if I'd be interested. And I said, yeah, I didn't really know what it was about or what to expect, really. I mean, kind of hear about it, from the outside, but I said, yeah, I'll go for it. I was an athlete all growing up, so it's been quite a while since I've actually competed at anything. So I was kind of excited for the opportunity. But yeah, and then tryouts came around, and a few apprentices showed up for the tryouts, and I ended up making the team, and I thoroughly enjoyed the entire process of it. So.
How did your expectations going into the rodeo kind of match up to the actual experience itself?
Oh, I did not expect it to be near what it was.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I had heard from the journeyman is all, really I had to go off of. And no, it was like way bigger than I expected.
Okay.
It was cool. Roseville, I think, did a really good job. They, that's the first one I've ever been to. I've never been to one to watch or
sure
even seen one on YouTube or anything. So, yeah, it far exceeded my expectations. And it was a lot of fun. I met a lot of people from a whole bunch of other states, and kind of got to like pick some other, utilities brains and see what they do on a daily basis and stuff. So, yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Right
I enjoyed
on.
myself.
Cool. Because essentially in your day jobs, you're all doing relatively the same work, but they could have a different approach. They could have to go about it a different way based on their terrain or their area.
Right. Well, like I was talking to a couple guys from Jacksonville, and, they said the first thing they notice when they get off the airplane, they're like, how do you guys like the Delta system, And, for me, I'm a little early in my apprenticeship, so I, vaguely know what they're speaking about, but they are predominantly a Y system, 4-wire Y system over there. So we naturally just started talking about what we do on a daily basis, and it was pretty cool. Like I said, I mean, there's a lot of good dudes out there, so I had fun.
Very cool. Okay. So, Josh, we mentioned that you attended your first rodeo when you were an apprentice. How do you feel like that helped you kind of as you were learning the ropes of being a line worker?
I think it helped a ton. I mean, as an apprentice, one of the components of the apprentice rodeo is you got to read through a safety manual.
Okay.
And I learned so much just from poring over that safety manual, just wanting to do well in that test. All kinds of rules that I didn't know anything about, and reading that thing front to back it helped me out a ton. And then just competing, very, very simple things like hanging a hand line. But with the rodeo, it's very detailed of, okay, yeah, you hang a hand line, you could hang it anywhere. But at the rodeo, you got to hang it in a very specific spot at a certain location, and it's got to hang a certain way. Like there's all these little nuances about it, just so your event or what you're competing in goes very smoothly, and there's no hiccups, and hopefully you've practiced out all of the mistakes, and how you manipulate a hot stick and how you hold it. It kind of expanded my thought process on how to approach this line of work, that there's definitely more than one way to do it, and how to be more efficient, which embodies the rodeo. Like you certainly learn how to become more efficient.
Okay.
How to make every move count, all those things definitely added up and contributed to helping me out or helping me improve.
Right on. Very cool. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit more about the events at the competition itself. So let's start with the events that the journeyman competed in. Can you tell us about what each of those events look like?
Yeah, so there's 5 events or 5 arenas, and they have those events built in individual arenas. So one event or one arena would be just Hurt Man Rescue, and there's 12 poles that are dedicated just to that specific event. And you go to another arena, and that one's dedicated just to arm change out. And, there's 8 dedicated poles to that. That's roughly the layout. There's 5 of them in total.
Okay.
And every year at the APPA, those events change.
Okay. So you find out ahead of the rodeo what the events are going to be?
Yeah. So the APPA puts the event package out there. From there, you print out the event package, and you read over the rules and the description of the event. And from there, we build a simulated yard.
Okay.
That mimics what they want you to do. And there's measurements, the material. And so we pour over that thing and we nitpick it, and we try to get everything as exact and as close as we possibly can. Sometimes you certainly make friends doing these rodeos. So you'll make phone calls and ask people questions, maybe ask for some pictures.
Okay.
What kind of adjustments, maybe somebody that's at the host utility.
Okay.
And what kind of material are they using? How are they speccing the event? So we can get the specific connections, the specific material, the specific wire, the specific tie. All that stuff adds up to being able to get through one of those events clean and fast.
Sure. So now you mentioned Hurt Man Rescue and the cross arm change out. What were the other 3 events at this rodeo?
One of the other events one was a simulated energized dead end bell change out.
Okay.
One of the other events was changing out a lightning arrestor for an underground distribution system.
Okay.
And then one of the other events was they call it like a roller up event, but it was simulating getting ready for a wire string.
Okay.
To take wires out of an insulator, untie these wires, take them out of an insulator, and put them into a roller. One journeyman went up, did that, and then the next journeyman would go put the event back, essentially, like go tie it, like the wire string's done.
Got it.
Put the event back or tie the wires back in.
All right, so the 5 events, and we kind of talked a little bit about how each event is timed, but they're also like judging you or grading you on whether you perform cleanly or not. What are some of the things that the judges might be looking for?
Certainly if you slip or fall or cut out off the pole, that's a big one.
That would be a big one.
Yeah, and this rodeo was challenging because the poles were incredibly hard.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was these poles, and you don't know what manufacturer they're sourcing or whatever, but these poles were hard.
Okay. That makes for tougher climbing, I would
100%.
imagine. Okay.
I went and hit a warm-up pole in the morning, and I was like, oh, gosh, these things are – and they were sticky, so your belt didn't slide that well.
Okay.
That was the first thing that kind of other things they look for. Another big one is dropping things. Certainly can't drop anything from the top of the pole. And then the other things you get judged on is the event and the order in which things happen in that event. Like, one of the events, you couldn't have grounds in a transformer before the cutout was open. So you had to do that. They would just watch out for that type of stuff. Encroaching, getting too close to a simulated line.
Okay.
You can get a deduction for that. Improper cover up. Just kind of general like safety rules that we do on a daily basis.
All right. Well, how about on the apprentice side? What did your events look like?
We had 5 events for the apprentices. A written exam, a Hurt Man Rescue, an obstacle course, lightning arrestor jumper replacement, and a sidewalk guy change out. Yeah, so they're all different than the journeyman's events. The written exam is weighted scoring wise a little bit more heavily than the rest of it. So, these guys, the journeymen, kind of let us know, like, study up on that, which is kind of difficult. There's a ton of information, like Josh said. There's a whole bunch of information in there, and it was a hard test. Nobody aced it. Nobody got 100.
Okay. Yeah, I would imagine they don't have like SAT study guides for the.
Well, that we have the manual.
Okay.
So it's like, they give you like sections that they're going to focus on. They don't tell you exactly, but they give you sections that they're going to focus on. So we just, York and I kind of went through and picked those sections out and just, tried to read through them and memorize what we could in the short amount of time that we had, and it still worked out pretty good. Probably could have done a little bit better, but it was a difficult test. Obviously, nobody passed. I think the guy that scored the highest got a 96. I think.
Okay, that's pretty good.
But
were you pleased with your performance on the written test?
I was pretty happy with a B.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, I got a B. I was pretty happy. I didn't feel that. I felt more confident going in than I felt coming out.
Okay. Like most tests, right?
Yeah. So when they told me that the score that I got, I was like, yeah, I'll take it. That's good.
Nice. Right on. Okay. So do either of you have any events that you prefer or that you like look forward to or that you would wish you didn't have to do? Will, what do you think?
I mean, this was my first one, so like Josh said, I think they change it every time, right? So, I mean, I don't think any rodeo is exactly the same, but if I'd just gone off this one, the sidewalk guy replacement was probably the funnest, for me, the funnest one. You got to transfer over a couple different levels, which is, always good. You have to have quick hands and, pretty good climbing skills to transfer in a timely manner, and I had to lean out quite a bit further than most of those other guys were like a foot taller than me. So in order to reach the end of the sidewalk guy strut, I had to lean out a little bit more, but it was fun. I like that one. Hurt Man I did pretty good on, which I actually only practiced once. I wasn't real confident going into that one. Well, time-wise, I knew how to do it. Just time-wise, I wasn't real confident, but it was my first event, and I never did a warm-up or anything. They were like, all right, let's go. And
boom.
So I said, all right, let's go. And, it actually ended up being pretty darn clean. I think that was actually my best event. But they were all fun. It was all a good time. I enjoyed all of them. Had a couple of hiccups on two of them, but the lightning arrestor jumper change out, I don't think I want to do that anymore.
No.
Yeah.
Skip that one going forward.
I just had a couple things just didn't work out in my favor. But,
okay.
If we skipped that part, I think I had a pretty clean day.
Right on. Well, and like you said, you're doing all this for the first time.
Yeah.
So in competition anyway. So
didn't know what to expect. So
yeah. Right on. Josh, how about you?
I would say my least favorite event's Hurt Man Rescue.
Okay.
It's at every rodeo.
Yeah.
It's a constant. It's there at every single one. And there's always different versions of it, but it's such a quick event. I mean, the fast guys, so how Hurt Man Rescue goes is you have all your tools laid out at the base of a pole and they say, ready, set, go. You put your tools on, put your rubber gloves on, climb up, transition over a neutral, climb up to a 170-pound mannequin. You tie a very specific knot, 3 half hitches around his body, and then you have to take the hand line and clip it into this block 3 times, a hand line block, cut the dummy down. You got to lower him to the ground. I remember this one time I was asking, they're like, don't lower him down too fast. Well, I asked the judge, well, what's too fast? This is a timed event. And he goes, well, when he hits the ground, if everybody's heads turn, that's too fast. Okay, got it. But anyways, you cut this dummy down and you got to lower him to the ground quickly and then not let him hit the ground too hard because they'll ding you on that because it's a simulated human.
Yeah.
So you got to let him touch the ground gently. Then you got to descend the pole, transition over a neutral, and then get your feet back on the ground. The fast guys do that in about 1 minute, 30 seconds.
Whoa. That is fast.
There's a lot of steps and a lot that can go wrong, and it's a speed event. So, you might gaff out, you might cut out, you might miss your transition, you might tie the knot wrong. The 3 half hitches might loop over themselves, and you're judged on how tight it is against his body.
Oh, wow.
They have a conduit, and you can only have so big of a loop in there. And so it's for Dustin and I doing the rodeos, it's let's get through it at a respectable time, because there's too many things, too many variables that can go wrong with that specific event.
Very technical details.
An event styles of events that I like are what they call like a dead and grounded event, where you do not have to wear rubber gloves. Most of the events they tend to want you to wear rubber gloves because most of it's simulated energized. But if they have like a dead and grounded event, I'd certainly enjoy those. Those tend to be a little bit more of a speed event. Like one of the events we had this year was a conductor tie-in. It was a simulated wire string where one climber had to go up, transition over a neutral, untie all the wires, put those wires into rollers, climb down. And then climber 2, your partner, climbed up the pole and then took it out of the rollers and tied it in. So that was a relay event, and I enjoy those. Okay.
So this was my first time at the rodeo, and I thought it was incredible. It was so much fun to watch you guys do your thing, and at like turbo speed. I mean, you guys do this stuff so fast. And make it look so easy, and I know that it's not. Will, I think on the guy line change out, I have a couple photos of you where you are like literally parallel to the ground, competing in this event and executing this change out. It was a pretty cool thing to watch.
Yeah, that's what I'm a short guy, so I got to do that. That's the only way I can reach.
Well, you looked really cool doing it. Let me tell you. So anyway, before we get into kind of the skills that are involved to complete these, I do want to stop and give a shout out to the APPA and the city of Roseville, specifically the Roseville Electric Utility, who put the event together. As we talked about, there were multiple events. There were over 300 competitors, thousands of friends and family that came out for it, and was open to the public as well. And I really think they crushed it. But again, I don't really have a basis for comparison. But Josh, you've been to APPA rodeos before. What do you think?
I'll agree. Roseville set the bar.
Nice.
They absolutely nailed it. This was probably one of the coolest venues where everything was in the same spot.
Okay.
The awards, packet pickup, the industry afternoon or industry evening, food vendors. Industry vendors, concerts. I mean, the rodeo grounds were in the middle of a racetrack. They did a phenomenal job.
Right on.
Just the organization, how it was laid out, where all the team trailers and team parking was organized. It was easy to get to the events, the ground. I mean, everything was amazing. So
very cool.
I was very impressed. I thought they did a phenomenal job.
Right on. Well, I hope that they're listening and are hearing that kind of praise, because they definitely deserved it. They did kind of a cool thing at opening ceremonies too, where they had a representative from each of the California teams climb a pole that they had kind of set up around the pole that raised the American flag, and then they used those climbers to raise the flags of the rodeo, of the utility, and so Dustin, who you've mentioned a couple times, Dustin Krieger, participated on behalf of TID and took part in the opening ceremonies. That was really cool as well.
Yeah, the opening ceremonies are always pretty cool, and when you go witness one of those and spectate one of the opening ceremonies, you definitely feel proud for the type of work and the line of work that we're in. Definitely a sense of pride.
Yeah, I would imagine. Absolutely. Okay, so I think next year, APPA Rodeo moves to Alabama. Is that right?
That's what I understand. It's going to be in Huntsville, Alabama.
Huntsville, Alabama. Fantastic. Well, they've got some big shoes to fill. All right, so let's get back to the events that you guys compete in. How do the events or the skills that are needed for the events translate into your job, the job you do every day, your job as line workers? Will, what do you think?
I think, for me, it's like Josh mentioned, we get like the what'd you call it? The job package,
Yeah.
part. And that's kind of something we do on a daily basis. We get a job package, and being able to decipher it into, how you're going to approach, doing that job. So you that's kind of how you base your practice on, the whole time that we're practicing. That's, for me as an apprentice, that's pretty similar. And that's, also a big one. We have to be able to follow directions, follow instructions, and
Sure.
And like one misstep in the rodeo, like if you decipher something wrong, I mean, that's like the whole event, you're going to get last, But that, and then, work position is a big one, being an apprentice, we're on the pole a little bit more than the journeyman climbing anyways, and, so just having that, extra exposure to, be able to get into good work positioning, and, the efficiency is huge, no wasted movements or missteps, just trying to get everything down to a T. For me, that's kind of what I got the most out of it. And, it was also competitive, the atmosphere is competitive. So there's a little bit of competition and competitiveness in, the workforce too. So,
Sure.
That's kind of what I have to compare it.
Okay. Right on. All right, Josh, let's go a little further into that. Will said that apprentices typically climb more than journeymen. Why is that?
That's just the nature of the job. You certainly have to know how to climb. That's a big component of this job. And that's the roots of this trade, is in climb. Back before we had bucket trucks and equipment and all that stuff. Everyone did everything off the pole. You certainly have to have that skill. TID, we're very fortunate in the way that our territory, our area's built, it's structured. We don't have a whole bunch of like backyard easements, tough to reach things where we're required to climb. It certainly happens. There's transmission towers out there that we can't access with equipment. We have to climb those. We do have very few backyard easements, and we do have to climb those.
Do you think that the TID teams are at a disadvantage at the rodeo, which is centered around a lot of climbing events, because we don't have to climb? Because you guys don't have to climb as much on a daily basis?
No, I don't think we're at a disadvantage. I mean, everybody at TID is a phenomenal climber.
Okay.
And that became evident to me when I started doing rodeos. Is you don't really know how TID stacks up against the rest of the industry or the rest of the utilities, and you get there at those competitions and you see how people perform and what they're doing, and you soon start to realize it's like, God, our guys are really good at what they do and how they perceive the work and how they approach the work, their efficiency. I would certainly say that, it's kind of the heart of what the rodeo is about, is kind of built into like the line department's DNA. Everybody works really hard. Everybody's efficient. Everybody's, tends to get on the same page. We all meet at the same yard in the same place every day. All of our equipment's in the same spot. We all see each other every day. So it has its advantages because we know each other quite well, know each other's tendencies quite well, work habits.
Yeah.
Makes it really easy to go get paired up with another crew or another person and go get a job done.
Okay.
Everybody tends to be on the same page.
Well, that's great. That seems like it would make for a good working environment and kind of knowing each other's skill sets.
Yeah. And I certainly realize too that the TID linemen are very well rounded. In a given week, one day you might be working on our 230 transmission line, and then the next day you're working on an underground subdivision, and then the next day you're working on like a 600 amp, installing 600 amp underground.
Okay.
So
it's all over the board.
We do everything. Our crews and our department handle every aspect of what you would encounter in the line work industry. We do a little bit of everything, and that's not the case at other utilities. I mean, you go to other utilities, larger utilities, you will certainly find crews that do just transmission.
Oh, okay.
And they would get asked maybe to go do an underground job. Well, they're not comfortable with that and may take a pass, or, hey, this is outside of our comfort zone or our knowledge.
Okay.
Or this might be outside of what we know how to do. Or some crews do just distribution. Some crews do just underground, where I feel like we're very fortunate here at TID, where we get our hands on a lot of different types of work. And we do it often, and we get comfortable with it. And I think it shows. The guys they're really good at it. They're comfortable, going from one job to the next and the different types of jobs that they might encounter.
Yeah, handling all the needs that might arise. Right on. Okay, so tell me about how you guys determine who is going to represent TID at the rodeos. Well, I think you said that there's a tryout process.
Yeah, I don't know how they've done it in the past. Apprentices, we got asked who was interested, and then we had a tryout day basically, and whichever apprentices were interested came out, and they had basically an event, for us. So we didn't know what we were doing until we got there, and then whoever did it the quickest and most efficient, got chosen to go to the rodeo.
Okay. Josh, kind of similar situation for the journeyman teams?
Yeah, we set up an event, and then everyone does that event. And we just do single or individuals, like an individual event. So we'll set up, a climbing event for one climber, and usually an obstacle course. And generally the fastest person is number one, and we just seed them.
Okay.
So we'll set up an event, and everybody will compete in that event, and then we'll take time, and then we'll seed them based on time. And then we do a rough point deduction, like if you drop something.
Okay. Who typically participates in these rodeos? Obviously, it's public power. Where do they come from?
It's anybody from a public utility. So we're competing against people from SMUDs, LADWP. Roseville was there. We're competing against people from Florida. I mean, it's just anybody that's involved in public power municipality.
Yeah. So it could be some of these larger utilities, like you mentioned, SMUD or LADWP, but it could also be like a tiny utility that is an APPA member that could show up and participate as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure how many linemen SMUD have. I believe it's probably in the vicinity of 150, 160 linemen, a couple yards, tons of crews.
Yeah. All
the way down to smaller utilities that might have one or two crews.
Yeah.
Where they serve the interest of, a couple hundred customers.
So it seems like interest in participating in the rodeos has kind of ebbs and flows. But like you said, Josh, that we had some new guys participating this year, not just at the apprentice level, but at the journeyman level. Do you think that interest in participating is kind of on the upswing right now? I
would say so. The team that went, they were, being that the rodeo was close this year, TID was willing to send two teams to go represent us. Mm-hmm. Definitely piqued the interest of individuals, and so they threw their name in the hat just to see what would happen.
Okay.
The guys that went, they were surprised and they thoroughly enjoyed it. They were caught off. I wouldn't say they were caught off guard, but they didn't know what to expect, and they were pleasantly surprised at the event, how it's structured, what goes on. I think those guys really enjoyed it. And I would say that the rodeo is kind of on an upswing where there's a little bit more interest than there normally has been in the past.
Okay. And Will, what about from the apprentice group? Would you say the same thing?
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like there's, I think York and I were kind of the guinea pigs because my apprentice group, we were all hired at the same time, so
okay.
The kind of like the unknown is kind of difficult,
Sure.
especially as an apprentice too. This is extra. This is on top of our apprenticeship.
Right.
So,
right.
There's already so much that we need to practice and know on a daily basis and stuff that this is all on top of that. This is extra. So yeah, I think we were kind of the guinea pigs. I don't want to speak for them, but it sounds like some of the other guys, sound like they might want to go for it next go round.
Okay, excellent. All right, so I want to ask you now a little bit more about training for the rodeo. So again, you have the skills, you use them every day, but when you're competing, you're on like speed 11. How do you practice for that? How do you ramp up to that?
So our approach to the rodeo is obviously we get the yard built first, and we try to mimic the events as close as possible to what we hope we're going to encounter when we get to the rodeo. And we'll look at an event and get an idea of the flow, how we think it should go, and we'll just do it slow.
Okay.
So we just start slow, and it's like rehearsing a play. You got to remember your lines. These rodeos are specifically the APPA is so well rehearsed and so well choreographed that you hear a guy go up the pole and you count his steps. You might not be looking, but you'll hear his 1, 2, 3, 4. You hear the fifth step. Okay, I got to do this at this time, and
interesting.
This has got to happen at this time. So we get out to the yard and we just start kind of walking through it, so to speak. I mean, climbing up the poles and all that stuff, obviously, but we just start walking through it and try to figure out the flow of the event. And, most of these events are, if you compare it to a real world job, like arm change out, for instance, that's a job that takes a couple of hours to go change out a cross arm simulated or to change out a cross arm energized.
Okay.
Well, at the rodeo, we're changing out cross arm out of our hooks in 6 minutes, 6.5 minutes if everything goes well.
Sure.
So it goes quite well. So we approach it slowly, kind of methodically, of a flow on how to hit your steps. Is everyone that's on the team keeping busy?
Okay.
Is everyone have something going on? And we'll kind of time it and see how it goes. And then from there, we kind of take a look at, was somebody standing around? Was there something that could be done? And we start to just condense and compress the event, and we'll run through it. Okay, we did that event in 10 minutes. We need to get it down to 8. How do we shave 30 seconds? So we'll look at it and, okay, we might make an adjustment on the timing of when a guy comes up the pole, or make an adjustment on timing at how we're working at the top of the pole. And sometimes we'll talk about it and it doesn't make sense. Like, no, that's going to be way longer. That's way more steps. And then we'll run through it, and all of a sudden we dropped a minute out of nowhere. And you're like, well, where'd that go? Like, where'd that minute go? Like, it shouldn't be faster, but for some reason it is. And
okay.
So we'll stick with that and kind of work through it, get comfortable with it, and then just keep chipping away. And eventually we'll start out at an event that's taken us 10 minutes to get through, and we'll neck it down to 6 minutes. Okay. Just over time and practice and trying to streamline everything. And
sure.
As we practice, we certainly practice at like an elevator of a quick speed, and it's to find those mistakes. Did something wrong? Did something happen? Did we drop something? Okay, what happened? How did that mistake happen? How do we kind of engineer this routine so that mistake doesn't happen a second time? And then we'll go do it again, and then a different thing will happen, mistake, and we're constantly working on necking it down. And okay, how do we approach that mistake? And then it's just a combination of reading the rules and slowly putting this event together. And it takes a while, like to be competitive at the APPA. It takes a lot of thought. It takes a lot of kind of thinking outside the box on how to approach these events. Certainly I wouldn't call it unorthodox, but an unorthodox approach to line work.
Okay.
Just a different viewpoint on how the event's going to flow and when things are going to happen.
Sure. So now, Will, obviously you didn't know going in exactly how any of this was going to go. So it's kind of hard to practice for something that you haven't ever seen before. Yeah. Looking back on it now, how would you change your practice methods knowing what you know now? Or would you?
That's a I don't know. I don't necessarily know if I really would. Now I just kind of know more what to expect, I would say, you know. Yeah, no, you know, just like Josh said, just from day one of practice was, you know, setting up the yard each event. So York and I did it together, and I'm glad that we were able to just go and set each event up ourselves, because, you know, it just kind of like gave us, we were talking to each other the entire time that we were even just setting up these events, you know, like, oh, okay, we could do this here or do that there before we even started practicing it. So it gave us, like, you know, some what we thought were good ideas. Yeah, we did the same thing that Josh said that the journeyman did, because we're not like taking turns. We're practicing right along with, you know, the journeyman, just on our own courses. Mm-hmm. So we started, you know, really slow, just even to see if we were, you know, doing it right. You know, after a couple of runs, you know, we got some good advice from all the journeymen from both teams. You know, we would ask them questions. We had to ask questions, you know, because
Sure.
like we'd never been there before. So we had to ask questions like, is this kind of how we do it, or should we do it like this? And everybody like gave us a ton of good insight. You know, and picking their brains, we were able to use some of their, you know, their thoughts along with what we, you know, were practicing as well. And, you know, there was things that worked for me that, you know, didn't work for York, and vice versa. Okay. And so we were critiquing each other along the way. And, you know, his the way he works, you know, could be different than the way that I work, but doing it together and you know, helping each other, like, you know, throughout the whole process was actually really good. I was glad to have another apprentice there with me. But same thing, we just started out slow and started speeding it up. We didn't even start timing each other until closer to the end, because we were like, there's not even any point, you know, at the very beginning. We were like walking up the pole just trying to figure it out. But yeah, and then towards the end, you know, we made it like good, healthy competition between the two of us, you know, pushing each other for times, you know, trying to beat each other. And that's what really started to like open it up, you know, and you know, get us. I think now looking back, if we could maybe start off a little bit more that way, start off at maybe a little faster pace, pushing each other a little bit more, now that we know what to expect and kind of how it goes. Yeah. You know, I definitely think we could like improve our times in different areas. But
right on. Well, I want to go back to something you said. You were talking about, you know, how you and York were kind of offering suggestions back and forth. You're kind of talking through some stuff, and the journeyman, you know, kind of gave you guys some advice on what to do. How does that sort of mimic kind of the feedback loop that actually happens when you guys are in the field? Like, you have to know what the other person is responsible for, what they're doing, and, you know, kind of exchanging information while you're doing what you're doing. How is that similar at all?
Yeah. It's we all, like I said, we all meet in the same yard every day. So guys will, you know, sometimes they'll have an incident and they'll talk about it, what happened, what went wrong, you know. Sometimes things went really well, or guys will come up with a new idea of how to approach a job.
Sure, yeah.
And guys will share that. Hey, we found this. And it even comes with tools. Guys, you know, we'll get a new tool or a new piece of equipment, and guys will talk about, you know, it's foreign, something we've never used, and guys will talk about what they liked or didn't like and some of the issues they had, and share that with you, and you'll share that with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right on. Very cool. As we've talked about, the skills that make you guys successful in your day job are the same skills you use when you're competing. But when you're in the field working, you're obviously trying to restore the outage or get the job done quickly, but safety is the priority, as it should be. But how does safety play into the competition at the rodeo?
I would say that's high on every rodeo's list. You know, certainly the APPA's list. They preach safety. I mean, they critique you on your belt adjustment. You know, we climb with these 100% attached fall restraint devices on the pole that supposed to keep you from hitting the ground if something happens, you lose control or cut out. So that's one area that you're judged on, is your safety adjusted correctly. And then certainly the appropriate amount of like cover up, the amount of like protective equipment that we put on the power lines. You know, are we using correct amount? Is it covered correctly? You're judged on all that stuff. And that's stuff it's stuff we do every day in the field. You certainly take more time out in the field to make sure it's correct, because if it's not correct, we're going to have big problems. But it's all the same. It's just a very, like I said, it's a very condensed, fast version of what we do in the field every day.
Yeah, yeah. All right, so we've talked a lot about the competition at the rodeo, but that's not all there is to the rodeo. Tell us a little bit about everything that takes place over the course of the weekend.
So, I mean, definitely over the years, the APPA's transitioned into more of a family event. They have a kids rodeo. They have concerts. They have food vendors. There's spin the wheel, things, and
so fun for the whole family.
Fun for the whole family. There's something for everybody. There's food. There's just a lot to look at, a lot to pay attention to.
Right on. Will, did you get to explore any of that while you were there?
I did. I was looking forward to it because there was, like Josh said, there was a ton of stuff going on. I wanted to soak all of it in, but it was cool. My wife went with me. She was super into it. But she was able to talk my parents into bringing my daughter down, surprise me on Saturday, the day of the events, and it was kind of cool. So after we were all done, we went and walked the grounds. They had a petting zoo and stuff, and we made some good food and music and all kinds of stuff. It was a ton of fun. It was it was. I would go even if I wasn't competing, just to go watch,
just to enjoy it. Sure.
Yeah.
And Will, you said earlier, you started talking to some of the guys from Jacksonville, Florida, and, just meeting different people. How much does just the camaraderie of being a line worker kind of play into the whole thing?
I mean, for me, that was kind of cool because at first I was, I don't want to say intimidated, but you're like, these are your competitors, you know what I mean? So you're like, I'm going against this guy, The guys I actually ended up meeting were the guys that won everything.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, little did I know that they were some closet awesome rodeo guys. But no, it was pretty cool. I didn't get to talk to as many people as I really wanted to, but just putting yourself out there and just talking to somebody that does the same thing as you, it's kind of cool. I was a wrestler growing up, so I had a whole lot of wrestling tournaments that I went to. This was kind of similar to that. At first you're a little set back. You don't really want to talk to the guys, but then you start talking to your competitors, and it's you have so much in common, and
sure.
And it's kind of cool to see, just that camaraderie, that one thing that kind of brings you together. This dude's the furthest state away from me, never met him before, never knew him, but we have a ton in common. You know? And just really good people. I didn't meet anybody there that I didn't care for.
Yeah.
So
right on. Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Josh, is it kind of a situation where you start to see some familiar faces from year to year?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I've made lots of friends over the years. Lots of contacts, and it's a blast for me to get to the rodeo and see a bunch of friends and make acquaintances, talk to people I haven't seen for a while. There's certainly camaraderie in terms of you do make friends, and this is something that brings us together, and you dive more into that, and you find out that a lot of these guys have the same interests you have.
Mm-hmm.
And these guys, I enjoy mountain biking. These guys will go dirt biking and camping and, doing all these different sports, outside of work. And you exchange phone numbers, you become really good friends. And I've done a lot of, trips and activities with people I've met through the rodeo.
Nice.
It's kind of interesting. It was our kind of rival team from SMUD. When Dustin and I got together as a team in 2010, we had a rival team from SMUD. It was Todd Prangley, Matt Wilson, and Caleb Bowman. And those guys were certainly better climbers than us, and they were certainly faster than us on the pole when we got there. But for some reason, our routines were always just a little bit better than theirs.
Okay.
And at this particular rodeo, that team got back together.
Oh.
And it was fun seeing those three guys back together. Todd's retired and working. Todd retired from SMUD, and he's back working part-time for SMUD. But it was kind of neat to see these guys that were kind of our rival competitors
back in the day.
And those guys look good. I believe they might have won. I'd have to look at the results, but they would have got first or second overall. The last event of the day, they had an issue.
Okay.
And one of the guys cut out of the pole, and that's a big deduction, kind of knocked them out. But they won a couple events, placed in one event.
Okay.
Those guys were on it that day. So, but it was definitely neat to see those guys, talk to them, give them a hard time. We got our 5th place trophy, and I walked by their table, and Todd's kind of like their groundsman, and he's kind of the spokesman for their team. And it was fun to give them those guys would have beat us hands down had they had a clean day. Okay. No problem. But it was kind of fun to go by their table with the 5th place trophy, even though it was 5th. And hey, Todd, we still beat you guys.
You got to give them a little ribbing. Hey, like we said in the beginning, bragging rights, man. Yeah. That's what it comes down to. All right. Well, before we let you guys go, I want to talk a little bit about the line job itself. So line work is obviously a very unique and a very tough job. What drew you guys to this particular career path? Josh, you mentioned that you like the kind of the competitiveness and being outdoors, but what made you think line work was it for you?
When I first kind of started approaching line work, and is this something that I wanted to do? Just looking at it, the equipment, the tools, the nature of the job was just so attractive to me. It just looked like a fun job. I mean, there's nothing. Every day's different, It just looked like it at the time, it seemed like a very solid career path.
Mm-hmm.
It's a trade, and there's a future here. It doesn't come without its hardships, Sure. Hours away, hours worked, I can remember a handful of times going in on Christmas Eve and
sure, absolutely.
And wife and kids waking up, and my wife telling the boys, they're 5, 6 years old, we'll open presents when Daddy gets home, and you go work all night and you get home and you're tired and you've been up for 24 hours and
sure,
you come in and you do Christmas and celebrate and get through all that, and then it's like, I gotta go to bed.
Yeah.
I'll be back
Dad's
in a
tired.
few hours, to continue. But I would say that this career is incredibly rewarding. I feel good about providing a service to the community. I feel good about when you go out on an emergency and there's a ton of people out of power, and how can we get this job done safely, quickly, and efficiently?
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy that, and I enjoy our big projects. It's feels good. Everybody at TID has so much pride and dedication to their job, and they take a lot of pride in when they're building something and making sure it's correct and everything's straight and right.
And then it's going to serve the community for decades.
There's a lot of pride in the job that we build things correctly and things are built well, and it looks good when you walk away.
Yeah,
it's a good feeling. Like getting through big jobs efficiently, and how can we get through this job efficiently and effectively, and everybody's on the same page. I really enjoy that.
Right on. Very cool. And Will, you had mentioned that, line work was kind of something that you always had an interest in, but,
Mm-hmm.
Eventually you decided to really kind of buckle down and go for it. What was it that drew you to this type of work?
I think, like I mentioned earlier, I was an athlete. I was a competitive person growing up, and this just kind of matches that, and, gives me that again, and, but even more than that, it's a lot more mental than what you even, noticed from the outside looking in, so it's the best of both worlds for me, and, there's like Josh, touched on, the pride and the type of work that we do, it's big. It's actually really cool to see, coming from the type of work that I did before, which, I've always took pride in the things that I've done, but not necessarily everybody around me, wherever you go, it's not always that way. And it is that way here, and it's pretty infectious too. It makes you like up your game a little bit.
Nice.
You can't have any bad days really. You gotta be up to par every day, and I like that because it challenges me. And being an apprentice, I'm trying to learn every single day as much as I can, soak as much stuff that I can in. And I've got a good group of guys, that are showing me the way. And I feel really fortunate. I feel like I'm where I belong.
Nice. That's awesome. That's great to hear. So in line work, obviously there's a lot of maintenance, there's a lot of capital work and big jobs, restrings, et cetera, jobs that are kind of scheduled out that you're going to be working on that particular day, week, month, whatnot. But then there's the emergency work, like you said, Josh, when the power goes out on Christmas Eve and, we're in the midst of a big storm. Or somebody hits one of our power poles with their car and whatnot. So when you have to be out there in the pounding rain and you're up 40 feet in a bucket and the wind is howling, like, doesn't that make you nervous?
No.
No.
No. That's the exciting part of the job. It's fun. When you get a call and you go in middle of the night and it's a big nasty car pole and there's wires down everywhere and it's a dangerous job, and
absolutely.
We absolutely recognize that it's dangerous and we recognize the dangers, but it's kind of a puzzle, and how are we going to solve this puzzle on this particular job? And I can honestly say that no emergency job has ever been the same. They're all slightly different one way or another, and it's exciting to go out there and solve that puzzle. And, how was this line built and how did it look before this accident happened? And,
yeah,
trying to make the scene safe and, cleaning it up. And it's all just exciting. There's a lot to it. There's a lot goes on. And, I don't know, I just enjoy it. Like it's fun to go out and, with a group of guys that know what they're doing, and we're all on the same page, and we just go to work and, try to get this job done so we can get home. Everybody wants to get home too, but
yeah.
How can we get it done efficiently, effectively?
Okay. Will, do you share that excitement?
Yeah, I do now. I'm not going to lie. I was nervous when I first started. Not nervous of those things. I was more nervous of like, I don't want to screw up.
Okay.
But now that I've gotten a little bit of time under my belt, I kind of know what to expect. I follow these guys' lead every single day. I have to constantly ask questions because, for guys like Josh and, all of our journeymen, it's almost, you watch them and it's pretty impressive. It's like second nature, and it kind of pushes me, and I feel like should push every apprentice to want to, become that. Slowly but surely we'll get there. But no, it is a lot of fun. You think about like the amount of hours that you have to, be away from your family on some of those calls and stuff. It's totally worth it because it's, the process of like learning and becoming something. It's like super paying off.
Mm-hmm.
And I have that support system behind me. My wife is awesome, my daughter's awesome, and it's it's just a fun job, like Josh said. I think it's fun. I don't know what to expect still on a daily basis, so it keeps it interesting. It's fun.
No, but I like that you mentioned the support system because with the different hours that you guys could be called upon to put in, who knows when. Everybody in the family has to be okay with that. So
yeah, that can't go. You can't understate that at all. Like a call at an inopportune time, like the kids have got to go to, track practice, or they've got to go to a birthday party, or they've, something, and hey.
Or it's their birthday party.
Or it's their birthday party. Yeah, it's happened. Hey, oh, shoot, I got to go. And, you have that support system. I think a lot of people that are in this line of work, like this is what we do. And as far as my family's concerned, like I met my wife, we were dating, and I just started this job and started this, and then it, started this career, and then we got married and started a family. So this is all my family's ever known.
Sure.
This is what Dad does. And, he gets called in at, 4 o'clock in the afternoon or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. He gets called in at 2, and he may be gone in the morning. He may be here in the morning. Mm-hmm. I would say my family's certainly used to it. Definitely have a supportive wife that helps facilitate that. I think it's incredibly important.
Absolutely. Right on. Well, I can say as a TID customer myself that I am very thankful that we have the crews that we do, and I'm very thankful that we're coaching up our apprentices the way that we are, and everybody works to uphold that high standard, and appreciate the fact that you guys work hard, you work efficiently, and you work safely, which is critical to the role. So appreciate the heck out of you guys as line workers, and appreciate you being here on the podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you for tuning in to the TID Water and Power Podcast. You can find TID on Facebook at facebook.com/TurlockID, on Instagram and Twitter at TurlockID, and on LinkedIn as the Turlock Irrigation District. I'm your host, Constance Anderson. We'll see you again next time.